Everybody, welcome to Trading Capital's exclusive analysis. In today's video, we're discussing natural gas and what we could look forward to in the next week as price action unfolds. So obviously we know nat gas ended the week pretty poorly. It actually had a very strong reversal from the highs, putting in a weekly topping tail. And this was to be expected. We have been preaching that, there should be a little bit of a move down in nat gas. Certainly that was a big reversal from the highs. Getting rejected at that 311 pivot is a pretty big scenario that could be unfolding here. What I mean by that is this rejection point could be actually setting up for a bit of a pattern here. What I believe could be forming a weekly inverse or daily inverse head and shoulders. You have your left shoulder pivot here. You have your head. I think that nat gas is now going to form a bit of a basing formation in this region before it starts to curl up. And I do think that we're actually going to put in a medium to longer term bullish pattern here. How I see this playing is I see nat gas going a little bit lower and then potentially curling up to creating that right shoulder. And if we break this neckline off of a inverse head and shoulders pattern, you would have quite a substantial amount of upside. Simply put it, if this comes to fruition and you get an inverse head and shoulders pattern on the daily or weekly chart, you could really see a 90% move from that neckline zone, which gives us a target of about $4.60 on nat gas. Now, is it going to be a straight shot there? I really hope it isn't, because I think that there needs to be some consolidation, some backing and filling for the price to be more sustainable. The reason you see such hard rejections like this is because nat gas is just going parabolic, moving too quickly, too fast. I am, full disclosure, still short nat gas and looking for a bit more downside to actually potentially see a nice retest of the daily 200 moving average at minimum. And if we look at the daily 200 moving average, that is currently sitting at 251. So I think that's a reasonable target to look for. Now, there's a couple intraday patterns that I'm going to bring to your attention. So this is the daily chart. There's obviously this weekly resistance channel that I've been discussing, pivot to pivot right through your breakdown red bar, right through your pivot high. That's a hard weekly topping tail to beat at this point in time. So I do think that we have a near-term top to be faded. Now, since this asset has broken out in the short term, dip buyers are probably going to be coming in full force, but there's a few patterns that we want to recognize before we can really jump long on this individual stock. So obviously, I think if nat gas pushes above its prior day high at 294, you're going to look for more longer bullish positions. If we start to lose this prior day low of 274, then I think nat gas becomes a very good day tradable short and a bit of a trend to the downside. Again, if I just turn off this indicator, just bear with me here, you're going to see a couple interesting things in the nat gas price action. So there's this hourly chart pattern. If you use this pivot low here, you could argue that nat gas has actually triggered a head and shoulders, technically speaking. So this is a nice pattern to watch, because if this starts to play out, your high pivot is all the way at around 313. You potentially have a move down to about this 261 zone on the hourly chart of nat gas. Now, what's another interesting pattern that I think is important to recognize is that we've actually potentially almost had this flat bottom triggering of this head and shoulders. You actually had price action get back above it. But I believe that this could be shaping up for potential another right shoulder. If you crack this lower boundary neckline here, I think that then you have another larger downside target to calculate. And you can see that this is potentially another right shoulder forming in the nat gas price action. So if this neckline breaks yet again on the second attempt, then you can see that nat gas could even push all the way down to about 239. So even though I am bullish over the medium long term, I am seeing some potential signs of distribution in the near term. Again, this asset class is one that's likely going to get some buy the dip action, but you can clearly see the price targets that I have in mind off of those one shoulder. The one head and shoulders pattern has triggered at 262. The other lower boundary 241 target has not triggered as of yet. So it's going to be really interesting to see how things unfold, shaping up. Again, it's nice to see that nat gas is starting to break above that daily 200 with conviction. Keep in mind, the last time we did that was over here, and then look what ended up happening. So the bulls really want to start defending this 200 moving average. I think that there likely will be a bounce off of that zone, but it really matters how we come in to that area. So I know on Friday, because we were a little bit oversold intraday, I ended up hedging my short position with some borrow call options. So I think those should be opening up at least probably in the $20 range or close to it come tomorrow's session. As long as nothing in the overnight market collapses in the nat gas price action, those should at least open up a little bit. But nat gas is at a very, very tricky, peculiar spot. Even if we look at some of these equities like UNG, which most people trade, look how UNG tapped its daily 200 moving average, and that was the upside resistance. So keep in mind that some of these ETFs aren't perfect. They're not moving exactly with the underlying commodity. I mean, you look at UNG tapping its daily 200, you look at the nat gas chart way above its daily 200, and it was very similar in this fashion too with UNG. So again, these asset classes are not really the ETFs are not really catching up to the overall commodity. You look at more of the resource stocks, they're kind of trading more in a line, just slightly above its daily 200 moving average there on EQT. AR is another one that's also trading well above its daily 200, so this has definitely outperformed. But again, interesting to see how some of these ETFs certainly lag in the near term. Even if you look at BOIL in the near term, that one also still putting in massive, massive lower highs. Again, another one that had that exceptional high volume reversal candle on that Thursday attempt. If you look at KOLD, sometimes it's good to just play around with some of these inverse patterns. You know, KOLD, you can clearly see that there's an interesting channel here. And sorry about the mess. You can see this parallel channel connecting these multi-pivot highs, multi-pivot lows, which actually pierced. You had a nice recapture of it. You're obviously hitting this resistance trend line right now, but ultimately I do think that KOLD is probably going to retest this pivot to this pivot and probably gets a retest somewhere in around this $57 range on KOLD, which I think you can kind of correlate and form your own natural gas target based off of that move if KOLD was to hit that region. On that note, thank you all for tuning in. Please give this video a like down below, and we'll see you on the charts a little bit later.